Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening. We have a very special guest uh, in the present on the presentation about health healing and the spiritist healing with Dr. Sonia Doi. But before we present her, I would like to conduct a prayer. So please join me. Dear Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to be here tonight. I ask you, please, that you bless each and every one of us watching this presentation. And I ask you as well that we can walk away from here knowing more than we knew in the beginning. We ask it, so be it. And as mentioned earlier, our guest today is Dr. Sonia Doi. Um, Dr. Sonia is a PhD, is a doctor and a PhD, currently occupying the position of the president for the Allan Kardec Spirit Society of Maryland in the United States, the Spirit and Medical Association, and the International Spirit Medical Association. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here tonight with us. And I'll give you the words.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for the nice presentation. I am so grateful to the Spiritist Federation of Florida for the opportunity to be here and give this talk tonight. So thank you all also for joining us in this meeting. My presentation is on health, healing, and Spiritist, mostly on Spiritist healing. And here's the outline. I'm going to start by definition of health and healing. Then I'm going to discuss the dimensions of suffering, holistic healing. And then I'm going to spend most of the talk on Spiritist healing and the Spiritist resources that promote healing. As most of you probably know, the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This definition was established in 1946, so quite a while ago, right? And most in recent years, the healthcare professionals working on spirituality and healing, they are proposing that the World Health Organization update this definition to include spiritual well-being. So let's talk a little bit about the words health and healing. The words health and heal, which is the root for healing, have the same origin. They are both originated from Old English, of Germanic origin, and they both are related to whole. So becoming healthy or being healed means becoming whole again. But what is becoming whole? That's something that sometimes is not well understood. So here is a definition by Dr. Thomas Agnew. He is one of the healthcare professionals that has most published on healing and holistic healing and palliative care. And he says in this paper published in 2005, to be whole as a person involves both physical and non-physical aspects of human experience. And the non-physical includes emotional, intellectual, social, and spiritual aspects. So here we see that being a whole person involves several dimensions, several aspects that are mostly non-physical. emotional, intellectual, social, and spiritual. He says that as a person becomes ill, they undergo transformations, modifications in which they are unable to be the persons they once were. That changes their experience in all dimensions, changes their story, their narrative. Narrative is the term that is referred to in uh, palliative care, in the current terms of spiritual care too. So when the patient refers not only to a simple symptom, this symptom or that symptom, they have a story of how they are feeling. So they are sick, but there's a lot of things that are involved and that change the way they are feeling, their living and all. So we are going to understand this a little better with this diagram. So we need to understand that suffering is multidimensional. There are several dimensions of suffering. And this was proposed by Cicely Saunders in 1950s. And she proposed that suffering as a mental, physical, social, and spiritual dimension. So as the person is sick, it's the person is suffering not only at the physical level, but all of these other realms, all of these other dimensions are affected. So for example, the person that has a disease, it's suffering of physical pain, some discomfort, and then this person is affected in their function. So they are now unable to function as they usually did. That starts to affect their mental state. So this starts um, to induce mental distress, and the person may start developing depression, anxiety, or other mental disturbances. Also, the person unable to function as usual, they start to get disconnected from family and friends, especially if this person is hospitalized. Or they are then disconnected from their peers at work because they cannot go to work, their friends, their community, spiritual, social communities. So they start to have that disconnect. And that we had a very recent example of social pain, of social suffering. If you remember the patients that were in the ICU with COVID, they were isolated, disconnected from their families and their friends. They were suffering, they were facing death, and they could not have a loved one to hold their hands to say goodbye. And that was kind of alleviated, but by very sensitive healthcare providers who found a way to kind of make some connection between the patient and their families and friends with video. So they connect them with their cellular phones, with iPads, all these virtual um, connections. But at least there was some kind of connection, although the personal connection was missing. So that's when social pain, social suffering affects a person. And nobody was, we are not beings that were created to live alone. We all need connection. Connection is something very critical for our mental and ability of our mental balance. I used to work in the laboratory, and I remember that when I was working with cells and culture, if I put very few cells in a plate, they were very isolated from one another. And if they were unable to connect, sometimes they would grow long, elongated um, structures to try to find another cell in the plate. And if they could not establish a connection with another cell, they would die. So even at the cellular level, we are not creatures that are supposed to be isolated. So finally, um, with all these these different types of suffering, the person starts to suffering spiritually, questioning the existence of God. Does God really exist? Why God is not helping me? Is this punishing from God? Why me? Why am I suffering? So all this questioning starts to agonize the person. So we see here that suffering is has multiple layers, has multiple dimensions, and then when we are dealing with a suffering person, we need to attend to all these layers, to all these dimensions of suffering, and that's what healing is for. Healing is supposed to actually make the person whole again. It's supposed to heal all these multiple layers of suffering. It's supposed to bring the person to balance again. So, Dr. Thomas Agnew, again, in a paper published in 2009, stated that holistic healing is the personal experience of the transcendence of suffering. So, what is transcendence? Transcending means rising above, finding meaning in suffering, finding meaning in life. It's interesting that the concept of spirituality that was worked out of a consensus in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, by a large group of healthcare providers specialized in spirituality, in healing, in palliative care. They, in the consensus, they came with this definition of spirituality. Spirituality is a dynamic and intrinsic aspect of humanity through which persons seek ultimate meaning, purpose, and transcendence, and experience relationship to self, family, others, community, society, nature, and the significant or sacred. So here we see that spirituality touches a lot of other layers, a lot of other aspects of the human being, like family, others, community, nature, and of course the sacred God. But it says that through spirituality, persons seek ultimate meaning, purpose, and transcendence. So, is it fair to say that spirituality serves as an instrument to achieve holistic healing? Because through spirituality, we can seek and find meaning, purpose, and transcendence, which gives the person the experience of healing. So I would like to propose that Spiritism has resources to provide a complete holistic healing. With all the resources that we have through Spiritism in our Spiritist centers. And this is my perspective. So, of course, I'm open to discussion and your suggestions, but I really propose that in our Spiritist center, we have several resources like study of Spiritism, social support, charity work, and Spiritist practices. All this will bring one or more aspects of healing. So let's work through each one of them. In the study of Spiritism, as the person joins the Spiritist center, they start to study and understand the logic of divine laws, Jesus' teachings, Spiritist principles, and by understanding the laws of action and reaction, the law of progress, they start to understand the meaning of their suffering. They understand the principle of reincarnation. They understand that suffering has a is sometimes a way to get aligned with debts that we created in past lives. Then when we study the teachings of Jesus, the gospel, we understand resignation, we find hope, we find courage to overcome the suffering. So all this and of course here I don't have the time to elaborate much more on this, but of course you all there are aware of all the studies of Spiritism and the gospel that provides all the resources to understand, to give a new meaning for suffering, instead of thinking that suffering, why am I suffering this life if this is all I have? No, I have multiple lives. I have multiple opportunities to grow, and suffering is just one step that provides me the opportunity to the way to grow. All this knowledge, little by little, is going to strengthen the connection with God, and it's going to be the basis of creating a solid faith. And that will provide spiritual and mental balance to the person, which will also give them strength to face their social and physical distress. So I would say that study of Spiritism, it gives us the basis to deal with all these types of sufferings: mental, spiritual, social, and then physical, because by releasing our mental stress, we can only benefit our physical body, but we're going to have more. For example, the Spiritist Center gives also the opportunity for social support. As the person walks in the Spiritist Center, they are always welcome with warmth by the members of the Spiritist Center. They find that there's no discrimination whatsoever. And that allows them to see in each one, they are really treated as a brother or sister. And they're fully integrated in the community. That helps them to connect with like-minded people. They will feel that other people in the Spiritist Center are there. They are all suffering also. So they're also looking for strength through faith. So that gives the person a sense of belonging to a supporting group. And this is something that usually is part of a questionnaire in hospitals nowadays. Do you have a supporting group? Do you have a religious supporting group? So that's given to the person who walks in and joins the Spiritist Center. Every Spiritist Center offers all members some opportunities to volunteer, and we have so much work in the Spiritist centers. We always welcome volunteers that help us in tasks within the Spiritist center, but also every Spiritist center participates in a type of charity work to help with the community, with the neighborhood, and so many other uh, types of charity work. And it's interesting that the Mayo Clinic in their website has a chart, has a list of benefits of volunteer service. And this is all based on research. So, based on research that was done, they list three benefits of volunteer service. The first is to improve physical and mental health. So this has been shown by research, and that reduces stress and increases positive, relaxed feeling by releasing the hormone dopamine. Provides a sense of purpose and teaches valuable skills. So the volunteer charity work increases life satisfaction and self-esteem, and teaches valuable skills, because sometimes the person who joins a charity work is doing some type of task that has never done before, so they are learning also, and that's valuable to them. For example, during the pandemic, we had a lot of our volunteers had to learn all the technology behind virtual meetings and all that. So technology learning and all. Volunteer service also nurture new and existing relationships because they participate in groups. It's a teamwork. They participate in shared activities, and that creates a bond between people. So there are several benefits of volunteer service that that improves mental health, that improves the social necessity of connecting with people, and of course by improving mental and social, we are also improving the physical health. Let's talk a little bit about the Spiritist practices. And we have several Spiritist practices offered by Spiritism. The first is prayer, the gospel in the home, spiritual assistance or fraternal assistance, passes, and magnetized water. All this will also provide healing at all dimensions of healing. And I'm going to talk about each one of them particularly. If we read the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 27, this chapter has clarifications on the mechanism of thought transmission and how to pray, clarifies what to ask in a prayer and what is received when we pray based on on merit and God's will. And if we learn all about that, we learn how to actually make an effective prayer. It's not just repeating words or saying words that for us have not deep meaning, but we learn how to actually make an effective prayer that comes from the bottom of our hearts, that we know what we are asking. Dr. Herbert Benson, a pioneer of mind-body medicine, who was a cardiologist at Harvard University, in this book, Timeless Healing, has this statement that I find very interesting. I'm astonished that my scientific studies have so conclusively shown that our bodies are wired to believe, that our bodies are nourished and healed by prayer and other exercises of belief. He came to this conclusion after many, many scientific studies. So this is to say that, yes, effective prayer, belief, faith are important. Nourish our selves, nourish our body and our soul. And that's what actually favors healing. Andrea Louise, in the book Between Earth and Heaven, says that prayer and the transformative power of faith greatly facilitate spiritual interventions. So we are helped by the spiritual benefactors when we pray and we have a solid faith. Andrea Louise explains that while the spirit is partially detached from the physical body during sleep or meditation, the benefactor spirits are able to make profound changes in the perispirit. Of course, according to the law of merit, we know that. But those changes in the perispirit will gradually produce changes in the somatic body. So it's not an instantaneous change in the somatic body, in the physical body, but in the perispirit. That if we keep our faith strong, keep on praying, that will gradually produce changes, and that's the process of cure that many times we see by the intervention of the spirits. We also offer in the Spiritist Center spiritual or fraternal assistance. And in the book, Attendimento Fraterno, which I believe, I'm not sure, it's not yet translated to English, it states that the fraternal assistance conducted properly within its objectives and under safe guidelines will favor the adequate help provided by the benefactor spirits. So the assistant, the member, the Spiritist member who is assisting the person who came, the assisted, is not there alone. He is actually helping the assisted person so that the spiritual, the benefactor spirits can work on him or her. So the assistant, the member, the Spiritist member, is attentive listening, showing empathy, showing compassion with this empathy, willing to help. And it helps with the assisted in organizing their thoughts. So the person comes and is perturbed, has a lot of things in their mind, and the Spiritist member, by listening, showing empathy, help the assisted person to organize, to reorganize their thoughts, and to understand their problems based on Spiritist principles. So that facilitates the work of the superior spirits. So the assisted person gains help by this spiritual assistant, which generates inner peace, promotes self-confidence, and favors better decisions. So the person, we don't give them the solution to the problems, we make them um, aware of the problems, and we give them confidence and power to make their own decisions in a much clearer mind. So that helps in their mental distress, helps in their sometimes social distress, because sometimes the problems that they come with are not related uh, to physical diseases, but they are, or mental diseases, but they are like families with problems with their relatives, problems with their family, with their relatives, with their co-workers, and all of that is, the assisting, the spiritual assistance gives them a clearance, clear their minds to find better solutions. What about our fluidic therapy? We have two types of fluidic therapies: the passes and magnetized water. And in the book Evolution into Worlds, André Luiz, through the mediumship of Francisco Xavier, says the magnetic fluid can act over the cellular elements in the body, particularly on the cells of the immune system that circulate in the blood, facilitating the mobility of these cells towards affected organs and tissues, leading to reduction or extinction of diseases. So he's talking about the magnetic fluid, not a specific practice of passes of magnetized water, but the magnetic fluid as a whole. And his explanation of the action is that this fluid penetrates and affects the physical structure at the cellular level, the immune system. That's basically the system that promotes our defense against infections and many other diseases. And lately, several researchers have grouped the practices, magnetic therapies known as therapeutic touch, healing touch, Reiki, Jurei, Qigong, and other types of magnetic therapy under the name biofield therapies. And of course, passes and magnetized water being a type of magnetic therapy should also be included in this group. So biofield therapies are defined by Dr. Anderson in the paper published in 2012 as based on a philosophy that humans have an energetic, spiritual dimension necessary for sustaining life that must be taken into account during the healing process. What is this energetic, spiritual dimension that sustains life? For us spiritists, this is equivalent to the spirit and the perispirit. And we know that the magnetic therapy works through the perispirit, right? So that's basically what they are saying. That's what is taken in account during the healing process. The healing is directed to that spiritual dimension that for us is defined as the perispirit. So let's talk a little bit about passes. André Luiz again comes to aid. And the book, In the Domains of Mediumship, he defines that passes are transfusion of energy altering the cellular field. Again, coming to tell us that this therapy acts at the cellular level, all the way to the cellular level of our, which is the basic unit of all our organism. It says that passes has a decisive influence in healing when received with respect and trust. So this is to say that the person, the receiver, has a responsibility too, has a responsibility to be there receiving passes with respect and trust based on faith, solid faith. And to have solid faith, they need to study, they need to understand the process. Andrea Luiz also brings the knowledge that not only passes are not only for the incarnates who are ill, but for the needy of whatever nature. That comes again, the concept of whole, of total pain, of total suffering, suffering at all dimensions. So not only those who are sick with physical disease that are helped in passes or mental problems, but all people in need of whatever nature. It's important also, and we all know that passes are a combination of energy. Part of the energy comes from the healer, from the practitioner, from the spiritist member. It's their own magnetic energy, but most of the energy comes from the spirit world, and that is channeled through the spiritist giver to the receiver. And to understand a little bit how passes work, we go again to Andrea Luiz, that brings the statement that the perispirit is governed by 7 energy centers that in other cultures are known as chakras, which branch into plexus or ramifications and vibrate in harmony with each other under the controlling power of the mind. So we see here all the 7 chakras, with the crown center being at the top of our head. And it says also that the mind is in connection with the crown center, which assimilates the energy from the superior spirits. And the crown center aligns the mind, which is the spirit, and the pineal gland, which is a physical structure within the brain. But the energy that comes from the superior spirits through the crown center, all the energy that is assimilated during passes, for example, are captured by the crown center and then distributed by the ramifications to all the other centers through the perispirit and circulates in the whole perispirit. And from the perispirit, they flow through the nerve system and also through the endocrine system, activating the endocrine system in the physical body. And here in this illustration, you see the pineal gland, which is a very, very small structure in the center of the brain, and is very close to the pituitary gland, which is the master gland in the endocrine system. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of the scientific evidence of passes. So we have faith. We know how passes work through the spiritist readings, the books. But it's also interesting to learn that there's scientific evidence. So this work that I'm going to show first was all the work that were published in about Spiritist passes were published by Brazilian Spiritist physicians. And this is one of the groups, and they did passes in preterm newborns. So how they did that? They had a randomized double-blind study, so all the groups were randomized. Nobody knows who is who, or who is giving passes, or who is a control group. So the babies were divided in two groups. There were 13 babies in each group. Of course, they were in the hospital, inside, because they were preterm, they were inside of a chamber. And there were two groups, one of people from Spiritist Center, volunteers from Spiritist Centers who were trained for at least 2 years. And then a control group who didn't know about passes or any other hands-on healing practice. They were only instructed to hold their hands 10 to 15 centimeters distant from the baby for 10 minutes on 3 consecutive days. So then this group measured the hormone cortisol, which is the stress hormone, in the saliva of the babies. They measured the heart rate, respiratory rate, oxygen saturation, and duration of hospital stay. And I'm presenting just one of the graphs because there were too many graphs, complicated. So this is the one that showed the most striking difference. So in blue, in this graph in blue, you see the control group, the babies that were treated just by people that didn't know about Spiritism. And in red were the babies that were treated by the Spiritist passes giver. And you see, this is respiratory rate. In the blue, there was the first day, and then they were measured up to the third day, and so forth, so on. And you see that the curve is going up. And on the contrary, you see the red curve going down. So the respiratory rate in the babies that were receiving passes was decreasing. And this is an indicator of stress. The more stressed, the higher the respiratory rate. We know by ourselves, right? You start, your respiratory rate goes high if we are stressed out. So that was one of the demonstrations of the Spiritist passes. And this is very important because there were babies, there were preterm newborn babies. There was no way that they would be influenced by who is there with their hands on. All the other measurements were also in the same trend, but not all of them were highly significant as the respiratory rate. And this was explained because even people who didn't know about passes, if they were holding their hands over these babies, knowing that they are preterm babies, they are still under some kind of stress because they are out of the womb before they were supposed to. Of course, they had good intentions for these babies when they had their hands on. So good intention is always a significant factor on healing. And that shows that the difference was not so great, but still in respiratory rate, we had a very significant difference. The other paper, that this was also done by the same group, and now they used patients on the cardiovascular ward in a hospital, and this group was divided into 3 groups. The patients were divided into 3 groups. One that had no intervention, not was done with them. The other had sham, meaning the person who was doing the hands-on healing uh, didn't know anything about healing, hands-on, and a group of spiritist um, Spiritist volunteers from Spiritist centers who had more than 2 years of experience in giving passes. The measurement was on depression, muscular tension, physiological parameters like um, blood pressure, heart rate, pain intensity. Interesting, there were 21 Catholics, 3 evangelicals, 12 were Spiritists, and 5 of them had no religion or faith declared. Again, I'm only presenting one of the results here because there were many, and this was the most striking. Here you see that they measure anxiety and depression, the baseline, meaning before passes and after 3 days of passes or just hands-on. The first group is the control group that had no intervention at all. The second group is the Spiritist group, and the sham is the one that had people with the hands-on, but that didn't know anything about healing. If you look at the first group, the numbers baseline after day 3 is basically similar, very similar for anxiety, for depression, and same thing for the sham group. Actually, anxiety was exactly the same number, 7.92, and depression, basically no difference. But look at the group that received passes. The anxiety had a significant drop in score. So the score of anxiety was quite high, 9.6, and dropped to 3.7 after 3 days of passes. And depression also had a reduction from 6 to 4.1. So this is to show that scientifically we can demonstrate the benefits of the spiritist passes. Let's talk a little bit about magnetized water. Magnetized water is also in the spiritist centers. We pray, we sometimes apply our hands on the bottles or on the containers with water. And again, here is a statement in the book Segini that, again, I think is not translated into English, by Emmanuel through the mediumship of Francisco Xavier, that says, water is one of the purest and simplest of the substances on earth. It is like a pure base in which the medication or the fluids from heaven may be imprinted. Now, I found a very interesting paper published by physicists in 2004. And this physicist says that water, after all his research, he says water and living systems have macroscopic coherent properties that are quantum mechanical in origin and that can give rise to memory for frequencies imprinted in them. So here it's saying something very similar to what Emmanuel said, that these fluids, this magnetic energy can be imprinted in the water. And this physicist says it's something even more, that the water has properties of quantum mechanics that allows it to keep the memory of that imprinted energy for a while. And that's really very interesting and very important for all of us to know. Now, again, some papers published from research, and this is about water treated with electromagnetic radiation. This was magnetized water using instruments. So not like what we do in the Spiritist Center. They, because of all these papers from physicists showing that water can absorb energy, and so they start measuring several things in water: pH, uh, uh, some electromagnetic properties, and so forth, so on. But this is very interesting because they show that the water treated by these magnetic instruments under an electromagnetic field, they gain structure. Meaning, if you see in this illustration here, there is a molecule of water on the top here, and then they start to conglomerate, to make structures of two molecules together, or one, two, three, four, like a linear structure or a circle structure. So they start to conglomerate into structures, and that reminds us of what? Of the water crystals shown by Dr. Emoto. And so if the molecules of water can assemble in structures like this, when they crystallize, of course they will have different formats, different shapes. And then some researchers, finding that the water that is magnetized change in structure, they decided to test this in animals. So this first group treated diabetic rats with magnetized water. And if you look at this graph here, the line at the bottom are animals that were not treated whatsoever. Then here is the measurement of glucose. Okay, so the bottom are rats that were not diabetic and were not treated, and then there is a line of glucose from animals that were not treated with magnetized water is the top line, and then the animals who were treated with the water, the magnetized water, their glucose levels were lower than the ones that were not treated. So they were treated for, if I remember, 4 weeks, and there were 8 weeks, I'm sorry. And then there were a difference in the glucose level. This group went even further. They treated diabetic rats who developed kidney disease, and they again treat them for 4 weeks with magnetic water, and they found that not only the glucose levels were lower, but there was an improvement of the kidney disease. And here I'm only showing, because the other graphs were too complicated, I'm only showing a graph of a substance that was measured and that is related to oxidative stress, meaning a damaging molecule. So this damaging molecule was decreased by treatment with magnetized water, which is the last column here in green. The one before the last were the rats that were treated with ginkgo biloba. And they had measured this before. They knew that ginkgo decreased this oxidative stress molecule, and they compared. So the rats that received the magnetized water also had a decrease. So most interesting than all of this is this work that was done for a group in Portugal associated with other researchers in the US and other places. They show evidence of changes in chemical properties of water by healing intention from practitioners of healing touch and Reiki that were distant from the water. So They had 286 practitioners, volunteers. 254 of them were practicing healing touch. There were like 6-8 years of experience with healing touch, and they were in several different countries: US, Canada, Australia, Peru, and the Netherlands. And 32 were practitioners of Reiki, and they were located in Portugal, different places in Portugal. The laboratory was in Portugal, in the University of Porto, if I'm not mistaken, and they had 10 flasks divided, 10 flasks times 3, so total of 30 flasks. They were labeled ABC, randomly assigned. Some were control, some were experimental target, and some were experimental around the target. So what they did was to take these 30 flasks to a laboratory, a large room, and they put the control 15 meters away from the experimental spot. In the experimental spot, they put 10 flasks that were designed to be the target, and 10 that were designed to be around target. And then they made a photograph. They took a picture of the flasks that were in target and around target spot, and sent to the practitioners. And they asked the practitioners to change the vibrational state of the water molecules, meaning to energize the flasks by meditation. In the flasks marked with the letter, say, A, right? So let's say B was the control, A and C. A was the target, C was the around target. So the practitioners were supposed to pray and to send vibrations only to the target flasks. And they were given a period of 1 hour. Within this hour, they should pray for 10 to 15 minutes. To meditate or pray for 10 to 15 minutes. And of course, they were in different places. So they received the photograph of the flasks by email. And then they were looking at those photographs and then doing their prayer from where they were. Then this group picked up, they did this for 3 days. They measured pH, electroconductance, magnetic field strength, and there was a change in the pH, a very specific change in pH of the water that was prayed for. There was a change in electrical conductance, and I'm not showing that because it's a complex type of graph, but I'm showing the magnetic field strength. The magnetic field strength was measured in the spot. So if you look at the graph on, I think on the left, you see that the curve starts on the bottom and goes very deep all the way up, and then starts to decrease. So the first point here, day 1, day 2, day 3, and that stabilizes. And then it only comes down after day 25. So for 15 days, the energy on that spot was pretty high and then starts to decrease. This is very, for me, is incredible. It's very interesting because what we see here is not only that this magnetic fluid, this magnetic energy works, induces changes in the water, but from a distance, like across the ocean. And not only that, but that the magnetic strength, the magnetic field strength, stays up high for a certain period of time. So this is when I was reading this, I was thinking of our Spiritist centers, where we are there every week, praying, meditating, with our best intentions. Imagine the magnetic field in our meeting places. Imagine how much good energy is there, and that is why sometimes a person comes for the first time in the meeting and says, "Oh, I feel so good just being here." No wonder, the magnetic energy is so high. So I would like again to propose that in Spiritism, and especially in our Spiritist center, we can provide a holistic healing, meaning healing on all levels: mental, physical, social, and of course, spiritual. So, again, I think that this is my perspective, and if I'm open to discussion and your thoughts about it. But I feel that we can really provide spiritist healing as a whole. And I would like to end with these statements that I found in the book by Divaldo Franco and the Spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. Again, Perturbações Espirituais. I don't know if it's translated into English, but it says, "The Lord's house is a hospital for all torments and needs of the human beings." All torments and needs. The Spirit Center can attend to both incarnate and discarnate. And we know that. We know that as we bring all these energies, as we pray, as we study, there are a lot of discarnate beings with us, learning with us, receiving that good energy, being illuminated, being supported, being inspired. It is the Spiritist Center is an emergency center for the afflictions of the soul and of the body, providing inner harmony to the patient. And finally, Spiritism as a consoler, after wiping the tears of those who are suffering, equip them with values to proceed with dignity, to construct a better future, and to experience well-being. And those values can only come with studying. So that's what I have. Thank you very much. Can't hear you, Marcus.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I muted myself here. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. Our hope is that all of this information helps everyone that just watched this. I mean, we really thank you so much. And I think we could finish with a prayer from you, you know. And of course, I mean, I just wanted to clarify one thing that the Spiritual Federation of Florida is trying to is making the effort to promote the spirit to talk in English. So this is not the only presentation in English that we're going to have, but we are going to schedule other things coming up. So please, whenever you see information of a presentation available, mark in your schedule, save the date and the time, because it's always very informative and clarifying for everyone. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
if you could finish with the prayer, we really would appreciate it.
Okay, so I would invite you all to join me in this prayer to express our gratitude for the benefactor spirits who give us support, who inspire us, in our utmost gratitude to our Master Jesus for making the sacrifice to incarnate in this planet, to serve as a guide and model so that we can progress. Our Master, that is our consoler, that is our therapist. We are so grateful for all the teachings that you left to us. We ask you, Master, to bless our brothers and sisters, to give them hope and consolation, to illuminate their hearts. We ask you, Master, to bless our brothers and sisters of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and everyone who was with us during this meeting. And so be it.
Thank you so much. And another thing, I just wanted to remind you, all of you, our conference is coming in March. So be ready for that as well. You know, it will be a pleasure to see each and every one of you there as well. Okay. So thank you so much, Sonia. You have a wonderful evening, rest of your evening and rest of your weekend. And I wish you all the same to everybody that was watching us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bye
Have a
bye.
good night.